Have you ever hated someone for so long that hate becomes part of who you are? If you're listening to me right now, maybe you know what I mean. My name's Margaret Lynn, and for 40 years, I swore I'd take my husband and my sister's secret to the grave, buried right beside the both of them. They betrayed me in the worst way a person can be betrayed. He left me for her, my own sister, and I thought back then that was the end of my story, the day he walked out of our house and never came back. But I was wrong, because 2 weeks ago, while cleaning out the old oak dresser in my bedroom, the same one he built with his bare hands before he left, I found something. A single folded doctor's note, tucked behind the bottom drawer, yellow with age, and smelling like dust and old perfume. And that note changed everything I thought I knew about the last 40 years of my life. You know how people say time heals everything? That's a lie. Time just hides things under layers of guilt, pride, and dust. And sometimes, when you least expect it, those things crawl right back out. If you're watching this right now, tell me in the comments, have you ever hated someone so deeply that you didn't even want to forgive, even when they were gone? Because that's where I was, until that one piece of paper forced me to see the truth I'd been too proud or too blind to face. I thought my sister stole my husband. But the truth was, she saved him, and I never even knew it. Asterisk, you know, people think 40 years is enough time to forget. It isn't. You don't forget betrayal. You just learn to live around it, like a limp that never heals. I live alone now. Small house, quiet neighborhood. My days are simple. Coffee at 7, church on Sundays, my roses on the porch. To anyone passing by, I'm just another old lady with too much time and not enough company. But when you've been betrayed by the two people you loved most, silence becomes both your punishment and your comfort. I used to talk to him, even after he left. Not out loud, of course, but in my head. Why her, Paul? Why my sister? And every time I'd see them together at the store, at family gatherings, smiling like they'd rewritten history, I'd tell myself I was the victim. I wore that title like armor. You know what's funny? After a while, you start mistaking bitterness for strength. You start believing that being unforgiving makes you powerful. But it doesn't. It just makes you smaller. Still, I didn't care. I had my pride, until that note that the day I found it. I was cleaning out that old dresser, the one he carved our initials into on our first anniversary. M+P. I remember running my fingers over those letters that morning, feeling that same sharp pain I thought had dulled decades ago. Then I saw the corner of something tucked behind the drawer's back panel. At first, I thought it was a love letter, maybe proof of another affair. My heart started racing like I was 20 again, ready for another wound. But when I unfolded it, the handwriting stopped me. It wasn't his. It was the doctor's. And right there, in those few lines, I saw something I hadn't seen in years. The truth, or at least the beginning of it. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, just staring at the note. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely keep it flat. There were words like diagnosis, prognosis, late stage, and then his name. I didn't cry at first. I just felt this numb, heavy kind of silence. The kind that doesn't come from shock. It comes from realizing the story you told yourself all your life might have been wrong. You ever spend your whole life hating someone, only to find out you might have built that hate on a lie? That's what that note did to me. It cracked something open-eyed, sealed shut decades ago. That night, I couldn't sleep. I made tea, sat by the window, and watched the moon rise over the same street we used to walk together. I kept thinking about all the years I wasted hating him, and her, and for what? Maybe you think I'm exaggerating, but when you carry hate for that long, it becomes a friend. It gives you purpose when everything else falls apart. I didn't know who I was without it, but now, after that discovery, I had to face something scarier than betrayal. I had to face the possibility that I'd been wrong, that maybe the man I cursed every night wasn't a traitor. but a man trying to protect me from something I didn't understand back then. And if that's true, then what does that make me? That night, after finding the doctor's note, I sat in the dark for hours. The house felt different, heavier. Every tick of the clock echoed like a heartbeat. I didn't turn on the lights, maybe because I didn't want to see the life I'd built on anger. You know what's strange? When you spend decades resenting someone, you build your world around that resentment. It becomes a structure, sturdy, familiar, reliable. Mine was built out of memories. All the little things I told myself were proof that he betrayed me. The way he smiled less, the phone calls he'd take outside, the perfume on his shirt that wasn't mine. Every detail I collected them like evidence in a courtroom only I existed in. And my sister Clara, she was always the soft one. The one who cried at commercials, who'd bake cookies for no reason. People loved her for her kindness. I used to think that was just another act, a mask she wore to hide her guilt. For 40 years I called it betrayal. But now, I'm not so sure anymore. I held that note close to my chest that night. I remember whispering, "Why didn't you tell me, Paul?" I expected anger to rise again, but instead, there was this strange kind of ache, like realizing you've been fighting the wrong enemy your whole life. At one point, I almost laughed. 40 years of hate. And all along, maybe he wasn't running from me. Maybe he was running for me. It's funny, isn't it, how truth waits? It doesn't rush. It just sits there, patient, buried in the corners of old drawers waiting for the day you're finally ready to face it. The next morning, I went through every drawer, every box. My hands trembled like I was opening graves. I found old letters, cards, photographs. One picture stopped me cold. It was the three of us, me, Paul, and Clara, standing in front of the lake house. We looked happy. You ever look at an old photo and realize you can't remember what that moment felt like anymore? I could see the smile, but not the warmth behind it. I turned the photo over. On the back, in Paul's handwriting, it said, July 1984, the summer before everything changed, and just like that, the air left the room. I knew exactly what summer he meant. That was the year I found them together. The year everything I believed about love, loyalty, and family shattered in a single afternoon. I felt it again, that old rush of anger, like fire licking through my veins. But beneath it, something new was stirring. Doubt. Because if that note was real, if what it said was true, then maybe that summer wasn't what I thought it was. You might think, why dig this up now? What good does it do? But when you've lived long enough, you learn peace doesn't come from forgetting. It comes from finally knowing. And after all these years, I think it's time I know what really happened that summer. If you're still listening, good. Because what I'm about to tell you isn't just about betrayal. It's about how love can twist itself into something unrecognizable. And how sometimes the villain in your story might just be the person who tried to save you. I stood up, grabbed my old box of keepsakes, and placed the note on top. The truth wasn't going to stay buried any longer. And for the first time in decades, I wasn't afraid of the past. I was ready to walk back into it. It was the summer of 1984, the kind of summer that still smells like cut grass and sun lotion when I think of it. Back then, I was 34, a wife, a mother, and in my own head, a lucky woman. Paul had just started his own contracting business, and though the money came slow, I was proud of him. We lived in a small house near the lake, the kind where every evening the air shimmered gold and kids rode their bikes until dark. My sister Clara came to stay with us that June. She'd just gone through a bad breakup, and Mom begged me to look after her for a while. Of course I said yes. She was my little sister. She used to braid my hair when we were kids, my homework, steal my clothes. I loved her, even when she drove me crazy. At first it was good. The house was livelier. Clara helped with the garden, played with our daughter, and laughed with Paul about things I didn't always understand. I remember one night we were having dinner, and Paul told a story about a client who'd underpaid him. Clara laughed so hard she nearly spilled her wine. I remember thinking, it's nice to see him smile again, but soon I started noticing small things. The way her hand lingered on his arm when she passed the dishes, how he'd go quiet when I entered the room, the late-night whispers on the porch, just talking, they said. At first I told myself I was being paranoid. Every wife has those moments, right? Those tiny flashes of insecurity you brush away. But they started adding up like raindrops that become a flood. One afternoon, I came home early from town. Paul's truck was in the driveway, and so was Clara's. I walked inside, calling out for them. No answer. The house was silent except for the ceiling fan ticking overhead. I remember stepping into the hallway and seeing her sweater, her red one hanging on the chair by the bedroom door, and then I heard it, a muffled voice. His voice. I didn't walk in right away. I froze, my whole body buzzing. Then, like something inside me snapped, I pushed the door open. They were there. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, shirt undone. She was standing too close, her face wet with tears. I didn't need to ask. The scene said everything. He jumped up, stammering my name. Martha, it's not. I didn't let him finish. I slapped him so hard my hands stung for days. Then I turned to Clara. She didn't fight back, didn't deny it. She just stood there, eyes wide like a child caught stealing. I remember screaming. I don't even know what I said. Words like betrayal, disgust, family came out of me like poison. Paul tried to speak again, but I wasn't listening. My world had already split down the middle. That night, he packed a bag and left. Clara left the next morning. No goodbye, no apology, just silence that lasted 40 years. I told myself I'd never forgive them, and I didn't. People said time heals. It doesn't. It just hardens you. Every wedding, every holiday, every quiet morning, their faces haunted me. My daughter grew up without her father, and I made sure she knew why. I told her what he did, what they did. I thought I was protecting her from the same kind of hurt. But maybe I was just passing it on. Even now, when I look back at that summer, it feels like a scar that never faded. The memory doesn't age. It stays fresh, cruel, and sharp. And until that note, that doctor's note, I believed that version of the story with every fiber of my being. After he left, the house felt like a crime scene, familiar but poisoned. His jacket still hung on the chair. His razor sat by the sink. I should have thrown it all out, but I didn't. I needed proof of what he'd done, like I was building a shrine to my own pain. My mother told me to let it go. She said, "Men make mistakes, Martha. Families forgive." I remember looking her dead in the eye and saying, "Then you forgive yours. I'm done." Clara didn't call. Not that I expected her to, but the quiet was unbearable. You think betrayal will make you angry, and it does. But what they don't tell you is that anger fades into something worse. Emptiness. I'd wake up every morning and listen to the silence of that empty bed. It became routine. Coffee, work, cry, repeat. And when people asked where Paul went, I'd say, he ran off with my sister. Simple, cold, satisfying. That sentence became my armor. I wore it proudly. It made people pity me, and for a long time, I liked that. Because if I was the victim, then I didn't have to look at the parts of myself that broke too. But the universe has a way of mocking your bitterness. About a year after he left, quiet ceremony. No family. Just a courthouse and a photo. I wasn't supposed to see her in a pale blue dress. Him looking older, thinner. When I found out, something in me died for good. I stopped speaking to them both. Not a word for 40 years. Not a single Christmas card. When my mother died, I didn't invite them to the funeral. I told everyone they were dead to me. And in my head, they were. But here's the thing about hatred. It doesn't stay still. It seeps into everything. It changes how you laugh, how you trust, how you love your own child. My daughter Emily was only 10 when Paul left. She asked me once, "Did Daddy love Aunt Clara more than you?" And I said, "He didn't love anyone, sweetheart. Not really. I saw something in her eyes shift that day, something I wish I could take back. Because I didn't just lose my husband and my sister. I lost the woman I used to be. The one who believed in family, in second chances, in love that lasted. For decades, I carried that wound like a badge. I told myself I was strong, because I never forgave them. That letting go meant weakness, but I wasn't strong. I was just stubborn. Still, I built a life. I raised Emily. I smiled when I had to, and I told myself again and again that I didn't need closure. But closure is a liar's word. You think you've buried the past until one small thing, a smell, a song, a note digs it all back up. And that's exactly what happened the day I found that doctor's note. For 40 years, I thought I knew the story. He cheated. She betrayed me. End of story. But as I stared at that handwriting, those clinical, careful words, something in me cracked. Why would a doctor write to him, not to us? Why would he hide it? And most of all, why would Clara stay with him, if she was just the other woman? That's when it hit me. Maybe there was more to that summer, more to what I saw. What I thought I saw. And for the first time since 1984, I wanted to know the truth. Not the version I'd built to survive the real one years past, but the hate never aged. It just grew quieter, heavier. You stop yelling after a while. You stop crying too. The rage turns into a steady pulse that beats beneath your everyday life. Like background noise, you forget to notice. By the time Emily turned 18, I'd become an expert at pretending the past was gone. I kept myself busy. Church committees, garden clubs, volunteering. It looked like healing. It wasn't. Every time someone mentioned Paul's name, I'd change the subject. Every time someone said Clara's, I'd smile and say, "Oh, we don't keep in touch." But the truth is, I checked their names in the obituaries every few months, half hoping, half ashamed of the hope, and then one afternoon, maybe 20 years after the summer, everything fell apart. I saw Clara again. I was in the grocery store aisle for canned soups. I almost dropped the basket when I saw her. She looked older, thinner, but her eyes were the same soft blue. For a moment I thought she'd walk past me, but she stopped. Just that, my name. It hit like a hammer. I didn't say anything at first. My throat closed up. Then I said, "I thought you'd be dead by now." She smiled a little. Still working on it. That calmness, that unbearable calmness made my skin crawl. She reached into her bag, pulled out a small envelope, and handed it to me. "If you ever find it in your heart, don't you dare. Not here. Not ever." Her hand trembled slightly, but she nodded and left. I never opened that envelope. I burned it, right there in my backyard. Watched the edges curl and turn to ash. I told myself that was the moment I took back my power. But really, it was the moment I sealed my coffin shut. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing her face, tired, kind, almost sad. I told myself it was guilt she felt. But deep down, something didn't fit. Why didn't she defend herself that day on the bed? Why didn't she argue, or deny it, or even cry for forgiveness? Still, I buried those questions. I didn't want answers that might ruin my hatred, because hatred was all I had left. The years rolled on. Paul died first, I heard through a mutual friend. Heart failure. I didn't go to the funeral. Clara sent me a letter a few months later. I recognized her handwriting immediately. I threw it away unopened. I remember thinking, "You don't get to speak now. You made your choice," but I kept the envelope. Why, I don't know. Maybe because I wanted proof that she still felt something. Maybe because deep down, I wasn't as done as I said I was. Decades later, when I found that doctor's note, that same familiar handwriting from Clara flashed in my mind, and for the first time, I wondered if the truth had been staring at me all along in the ashes I refused to read. Everything I believed about that summer, that affair, that betrayal, suddenly felt like a story a broken woman told herself to survive. But at the time, back then, it was the only truth I had. The only thing that made sense in a world that stopped making sense. I built my identity around that wound. I was the woman whose husband left her for her sister. That was my story, my explanation, my shield. And if that wasn't true, then who the hell was I? I was cleaning out Paul's old dresser that morning, not because I missed him, don't get me wrong. The man could rot in peace for all I cared. But at 73, you start realizing that someone else will eventually have to deal with your junk. And I didn't want anyone touching his things when I was gone. The drawer was stuck, swollen from humidity and time. I had to yank it hard enough to splinter the edge. Inside were the usual relics, cufflinks, receipts from God knows when, a broken watch, yellowed photos, and then the envelope. It was thin, brown, folded over once and tucked behind an old driver's manual. On the front, written in the faintest ink, Dr. Lowell Confidential. I almost threw it in the trash until I saw the date. August 1982. That month. The same damn month he left me. I opened it. My hands were shaking, but I didn't notice until the paper started tearing. Inside, a short note, the kind a doctor writes in a hurry. The test confirms advanced cardiomyopathy. I advise immediate discussion with family, especially regarding future prognosis. 3 to 6 months estimated, depending on medication adherence. It didn't make sense at first. Cardiomyopathy. That's heart failure. Paul didn't die until 1995. Then I noticed a faint penciled line under the doctor's signature. Patient Clara B. I read it again, then again. The room started spinning. What was a doctor's note about Clara's heart condition doing in Paul's drawer? For a second, I thought maybe he kept it as a reminder of her betrayal, some twisted sentiment. But then, under the fold, I saw handwriting. Paul's, she doesn't want anyone to know. Said she'd rather leave than make Martha watch her fade. I swear the air left my body. I sat there on the bedroom floor, note trembling in my hand, staring at the words that shouldn't exist. Leave, then make Martha watch her fade. She left to protect me. I didn't believe it. Couldn't. After 40 years of hate, you don't just erase the story that's held you together. But I couldn't stop replaying it. The letter she tried to give me at the grocery store. The envelope I burned without reading. The sadness in her eyes. What if the affair wasn't what I thought? What if she wasn't the villain, but the one quietly dying? That question burrowed into my chest like a splinter I couldn't pull out. For days, I couldn't sleep. I searched every box, every folder Paul ever owned, every drawer. I found fragments, postcards, prescriptions, a hospital receipt from Knoxville with her name on it. All dated that same summer. The pattern was undeniable. He wasn't having an affair. He was taking her to her doctor's appointments. And suddenly, every memory, every scream, every accusation replayed in my head under a different light. The night I found her on his bed, she wasn't half-dressed. She was shivering. The medicine bottles on the table, I thought they were perfume samples. They were heart meds. And Paul's words, the ones that haunted me, you wouldn't understand. He was right. I didn't, because I didn't ask. I didn't listen. I wanted betrayal so badly that I found it in everything I saw, because hating them was easier than losing them. But now I was left with a ghost. I'd killed myself. I took the note to the porch that evening, same porch I'm sitting on right now, talking to you, and I just stared at it until the sunset bled into night. The crickets were loud, but the silence inside my head was louder. If you're listening to me right now, tell me, what would you do if your whole life's truth turned out to be a lie? Would you forgive the dead? Or would you drown in the guilt of realizing you were the villain all along? Because I don't know. I really damned single. The next morning I went to the town library. I hadn't been there in years. The woman at the desk looked at me like I'd crawled out of a time capsule. I'm looking for hospital records, I said. From Knoxville? Early 80s, she blinked. You'd have to call the archives, ma'am. So I did. I called every number I could find. Hospitals, clinics, Even that old doctor's office, Lowell's name was long gone. But someone finally found a digital record, and there it was again, Clara Bennett. Diagnosed August 10th, 1982, the exact week she disappeared. I stared at the record until the paper blurred. She wasn't running to him. She was running from death. It was like every organ inside me started to ache. All the anger I'd held, every curse I'd whispered to her name, came back like acid reflux of the soul. But guilt alone wasn't enough. I needed proof. I needed to know how much of my life had been built on a misunderstanding, so I drove back to our old neighborhood. The road had changed, new houses, trimmed hedges, polished driveways, but the air was the same. That heavy southern summer air that smells like wet leaves and regret. I parked in front of the blue house, the one that used to belong to Clara's aunt. The woman who answered the door must have been her niece. Late 50s, gentle face, cautious eyes. I told her my name. She froze. "You're Martha." Her voice trembled like she'd heard it in stories. "Yes," I said. "I need to know what really happened to Clara." She hesitated, then opened the door wider. "Come in." The house smelled of lavender and something faintly medicinal. Photos lined the hallway. Clara's smile frozen in the kind of warmth I'd convinced myself was fake. "She used to talk about you," the niece said, "right up until the end." I almost laughed. Talk about me, after what she did. The woman looked down. "She didn't do what you think." And then she told me the truth that cracked everything open. Clara had been sick for months before she left. She'd fainted twice at work. Paul found out by accident. He was the one who took her to the hospital the night she collapsed. He stayed by her side while the doctors broke the news. Clara didn't want anyone to know, least of all me. She said she couldn't bear the thought of you watching her fade. The niece said she thought disappearing would make it easier. Easier. That word felt like a slap. She thought leaving me alone with my hate was easier than letting me love her through her dying. I sat there, staring at the carpet, every second heavier than the last dot. And then the niece pulled out a small wooden box. This was hers. She made me promise to keep it until you came. Inside were a few trinkets, an old locket, a dried flower, a folded letter. The letter had my name on it, Martha. My hands shook so bad I could barely open it. Her handwriting was weaker than I remembered, uneven, trembling. "If you're reading this, it means you finally stopped hating me long enough to look for the truth. I don't blame you. I would have hated me too. But I couldn't stay and let you see what I was becoming. I wanted you to remember me laughing, not gasping. I wanted you to have your strength, not my weakness. And if you hate me forever for that, I'll still love you." I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I had spent 40 years building walls of bitterness, feeding off the anger that made me feel alive, and now, with one letter, she'd dismantled every brick. I looked up at the niece, tears burning my eyes. "Where is she?" I asked. The woman smiled softly. "Buried behind St. Mary's, under the willow." I drove there that evening, before the sun went down. It was a small grave, simple, unmarked, except for her name and the date, 1983. She'd lasted less than a year after she left. I stood there for a long time. The sky was quiet, orange fading to purple. And I whispered, "You coward. You should have let me love you anyway." Then I laughed through the tears, because even after death, she was still the one teaching me lessons I never wanted to learn. I don't know how long I stood there. Maybe an hour, maybe more. The willow branches swayed like they were whispering things I wasn't ready to hear. And for the first time in my life, I felt small, truly small. Like my hate had been the only thing keeping me upright all these years. And now that it was gone, I was weightless. You ever feel that? That strange emptiness when the person you blame disappears and you realize there's nothing left to fight. It's terrifying, because when you lose your anger, you have to face what's underneath it. I sat down in the dirt beside her grave. I told her everything, every ugly word, every sleepless night, every cruel thing I'd said to her picture. I told her about the anniversaries I spent alone, about how I'd glare at her face in old photos and whispered that she got what she deserved. And I told her I was wrong. Then I drove straight to the cemetery where Paul was buried. I hadn't been there in years either. His stone was clean. My daughter visited often, even though she hated him for what he did. I knelt down, still holding Clara's letter. "Guess you got the last laugh, huh?" I said quietly. 40 years of silence, and now I'm the fool. And as the wind moved through the trees, I thought about the night he left. The words I screamed at him. The look on his face, that mixture of pity and pain. I had told myself it was guilt, but what if it was grief? I pressed my hand against the stone. All that time, he'd been carrying the weight of a secret that wasn't even his to tell. Why didn't he just say something? Why didn't either of them trust me enough to know I could have handled it? That question clawed at me. And then I remembered something the niece had said, that Paul had been the one to take Clara to the hospital. It hit me like lightning. If he took her there, maybe he'd known from the start. Maybe the note I found wasn't his secret. Maybe it was hers. I looked at the letter again. The handwriting was delicate, but not his style. The L's curled like a woman's. How had I missed that? 40 years. And I never saw the truth that was right in front of me. That's when I started shaking. Because if he'd kept her illness a secret, it wasn't betrayal, it was protection. He was trying to honor her wish to disappear peacefully, and I'd destroyed him for it. I went home and tore through every old drawer, every box, every trace of him I could find, and buried beneath the yellowed receipts and brittle papers. I found a small brown envelope with my name written on it. His handwriting this time. "Martha, if you ever find this, please know I tried. I wanted to tell you, but she made me promise not to. I stayed because I loved you. I left because she was dying and she needed someone to help her go with dignity. I thought I could come back and explain, but you wouldn't look at me anymore. Maybe one day you'll understand that love isn't always fair. Sometimes it chooses who needs it most." That was the moment my chest cracked open. Every breath felt sharp. Every sound felt far away. I'd built my identity on being the woman who was betrayed, and now I had no idea who I was without that story. He wasn't the villain. She wasn't the thief. I was the one who sentenced them both to memory's prison. You know that saying, time heals all wounds? It's a lie. Time doesn't heal. It just hides the wound until you find the knife again. And I'd found both the knife and the truth that night. I sat on the kitchen floor with both letters beside me, his and hers, and cried until my throat gave out. 40 years of hate turned into 40 seconds of silence. It was the quietest sound I've ever heard. After that night, I couldn't sleep. I just sat there, letters open, the clock ticking like a metronome for guilt. Do you ever look back at a memory and suddenly realize you were the villain in your own story? That's what it felt like. I started replaying the scenes, the ones I'd sworn I'd never revisit. The morning he left, the way his hands trembled when he said, "You don't understand." I'd thought it was cowardice. Now I saw it for what it was, heartbreak. He was breaking right in front of me, and I was too busy shouting to see it. And Clara. God, I could see her face again. That day at the family barbecue, everyone was laughing, but she wasn't eating. She said the heat made her dizzy. I'd rolled my eyes, whispered to my cousin that she was acting delicate for Paul's attention. Now I realized that was the sickness. The first sign? The memories kept flipping like old film reels in reverse. Every moment I'd used as proof of betrayal became evidence of love. The way he drove her home after church. He was taking her to her treatments. The late-night phone calls. Updates from her doctor. The quiet looks between them. Shared grief. Not lust. Grief. You know what's worse than being betrayed? Finding out you've spent half your life betraying the truth. I kept asking myself, why didn't they just tell me? And the answer hit me like a confession I never wanted to hear. Because I was the kind of woman they couldn't tell. Proud, stubborn, so sure I was right that no one dared show me otherwise. They didn't hide the truth from me. They hid it for me. To protect me from my own strength, I went to the mirror that morning, looked straight into it at the wrinkled skin, the dull eyes, the mouth that had learned to twist anger into armor. And I said, "You ruined them." The mirror didn't flinch. It just reflected the face of someone who finally understood the cost of certainty. For 40 years, I'd carried my pain like a badge, told everyone I was the woman he left, but the truth, I was the woman he protected. And that realization hurt more than any betrayal ever could. I called my daughter Anne that afternoon. She picked up on the second ring. "Mom," she said, her voice wary, like she was expecting another complaint about the lawn or the mailman. "Anne," I said, "you remember what I told you about your father and your aunt?" "Of course," she said coldly. "That he cheated, that she—" I cut her off. "It wasn't like that." There was silence. Then, sharper, "What do you mean?" I told her everything. The letters, the illness, the truth that made my own hate look childish. And when I finished, she didn't say anything for a long time, just breathing. Then, quietly, "So, I hated him for nothing." That question broke me again, because that's what hate does. It doesn't die with you. It infects the next generation, Mom. You let me grow up hating my father, Anne finally said. Her voice cracked halfway through. "You told me he abandoned us." "You told me, I know," I whispered. "I was wrong." "That's not enough," she snapped. "You made me hate him. Every time I saw a man who looked like him, I'd feel disgust. I wouldn't even visit his grave because I thought he was a monster." Her voice broke, and I heard the sound of her crying on the other end. "You ever realize too late that your pain didn't end with you, it multiplied?" That's what I heard in her sobs, the echo of my own voice, decades younger, poisoned by pride. "I didn't know, Anne. I swear I didn't," I said. He left the letter in the drawer. "I only found it this week." 40 years too late, she said coldly. "You let me hate a dead man." That silence after. It wasn't just silence. It was the sound of 40 years of lies collapsing between us. "I'll bring you the letters," I said. "You deserve to see them yourself." She hung up without answering. I just sat there, staring at the phone, realizing that truth doesn't free you. It punishes you. It takes everything you thought made you righteous and rubs your face in it. That evening, I went through the old photo albums. Pictures of Paul holding in as a baby, Clara laughing behind the camera. And I noticed something I'd never seen before. The way Clara looked at me, not him, like she was guarding a secret that wasn't hers to tell. The memories started talking back to me. I remembered the night I threw my wedding ring at him. He didn't shout. He just stood there, tears in his eyes, and said, "You'll understand someday." I'd screamed back, "Don't you dare talk to me like I'm stupid." Now I finally understood what he meant. He wasn't pleading for forgiveness. He was mourning in silence. I poured myself a drink, my first in months. My hands shook as I lifted it. "You both could have told me," I muttered aloud, as if they were still in the room. "You didn't have to make me your villain." But deep down, I knew the truth. They didn't make me their villain. I volunteered for the role. I'd chosen anger over understanding, and that choice had aged me more than time ever could. The next morning, I drove to Anne's house with the letters. She opened the door, eyes swollen from crying. I handed her the envelopes, and for a second, she just stared at them like they were ticking bombs. Then she said quietly, "You really didn't know?" "No," I said, "but I should have." She read Clara's letter first. Her hands trembled as she got to the line, "I wanted you to remember me laughing, not gasping." By the time she finished, she couldn't look at me. "She loved you, Mom," Anne whispered. "She was trying to protect you." "I know," I said, and I turned her into the enemy. She started crying again, and this time I did too. We sat there like strangers, learning how to speak after years of silence. I thought I'd reached the end of the truth, but that night, something in me wouldn't rest. Because if Paul stayed with Clara until she died, then Who buried her? Who paid for the grave? And what happened to him after she was gone? That's when I realized there was still one piece missing. The one truth neither letter had mentioned, and I knew where I'd find it. I couldn't sleep again that night. My mind wouldn't stop circling the same question. What happened after Clara died? Neither letter said. It was like they'd both stopped writing at the same moment, right before the real ending. And I needed to know. Not for them. For me. So, the next morning, I drove to St. Mary's again. The caretaker, an older man with kind eyes, was trimming the hedges by the gate. "Excuse me," I said. "Do you keep old burial records here?" He nodded. "We do, ma'am." "Depends how far back you're looking." 1983, I said. "Name's Clara Bennett." He flipped through a weathered ledger, finger tracing down faded ink. After a moment, he found it. "Here she is. Buried July 83, paid in full by." He squinted closer. "Paul Whitman." My chest tightened. "He paid for it?" I asked. He nodded. "Everything. Funeral, headstone, plot. Then came by every Sunday for about 6 months, then stopped." I gripped the edge of the counter. "Do you know why?" The man shrugged. "Got sick, I think. His daughter came once later, said he passed the same year." The world went quiet for a second. "He died the same year she did." I walked out to the grave again, the same dirt I'd stood over days before. And this time I noticed something I hadn't before, a small, almost hidden engraving near the edge of the stone. Faint, like time had tried to erase it. It read. I sank to my knees. He hadn't just buried her. He'd buried the secret with her. You ever realize a person's silence was their loudest kind of love? That's what that line meant. He kept his promise to protect her wish, to let her fade with dignity, even if it meant dying misunderstood. I pressed my palm against the stone. "You fool," I whispered. "You could have told me." But deep down, I knew he couldn't, because I wouldn't have listened. For 40 years, I'd punished 2 people who had only ever loved me in ways I couldn't see. And now all I had left were their ghosts and my own regret as I sat there. I saw something small sticking out of the dirt beside the grave, a rusted key. I pulled it out, brushed the soil away. On the tag, faintly etched, were the letters C.W. Clara Whitman. I froze. She'd taken his last name. I drove home trembling, key in hand, and opened the old cedar chest in my living room, Paul's old belongings I'd refused to throw out. Inside, among a few folded shirts and a broken watch, was a small lockbox. I'd never opened it before. The key fit perfectly. Inside were photographs. Clara in a hospital bed, smiling weakly, Paul beside her holding her hand. Notes from nurses. A discharge slip. And one last letter, sealed but never sent, addressed to me. "Martha, I know you'll never forgive me. I wouldn't either. But when you find this, and you will someday, I want you to know I did everything I could to keep her comfortable. She asked me not to tell you because she wanted your memories of her to stay clean. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from the truth. I hope someday you'll forgive me for loving her the way you once did, fiercely, selflessly, and without measure." I folded the letter slowly, my hands shaking so badly I almost tore it. And that's when the last piece clicked into place. He hadn't chosen her over me. He'd chosen love over pride, something I'd never been able to do. I sat there in the dark, clutching the letter and whispering the only words left to say. I forgive you, both of you. Too late, but I do. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat there, the letter spread open on the kitchen table, the clock ticking like a hammer in my skull. 40 years of lies. 40 years of poisoning my daughter's heart against a man who didn't deserve it. Evelyn always said, "Mom, you were strong for leaving him." She never knew he didn't leave us. He left to take care of the dying woman we both loved, and I let her grow up thinking her father was a traitor. I let her hate him so I wouldn't have to face my own guilt. That realization, it doesn't just sting. It burns. At around 6 a.m., I heard her car pull up, Evelyn always comes by Sunday mornings with breakfast. Pancakes, orange juice, a little too much syrup. Her way of checking I'm still alive. She walked in, cheerful, as always. "Morning, Mom. You look like you've seen a ghost." I smiled weakly. "In a way, I have." She frowned, putting the food down. "You okay? You're pale." I wanted to tell her everything right there. Hand her the letter. Let her see that her father wasn't the man I painted him to be. But I hesitated. You ever realize the truth might do more damage than the lie ever did? That's what hit me in that moment. Evelyn had built her whole life on one story, that her father betrayed her mother. That story made her strong, independent, fierce. It gave her direction, even if it was built on a lie. If I shattered that now, what would she have left? I opened my mouth anyway. "Evelyn," I said softly, "what if your father wasn't the man we thought he was?" She laughed. "Oh God, don't tell me you're missing him now, after all these years." "No," I said quickly. "I'm just saying, maybe things weren't as black and white as I made them seem." Her face changed. That easy smile vanished. "Mom, don't start this." "I found something," I said. "A letter." "From him?" Her eyes went cold. "You kept letters from him after everything he did." "Evelyn, please, please, what?" "You told me he left you for your best friend. You cried in front of me, remember? You made me hate him." Her voice cracked. "You made me hate my father." Tears stung my eyes, because I hated myself. She stared at me like I'd slapped her. "What are you talking about?" I pushed the letter toward her. "Read it. Just once. Then you'll understand." But she didn't touch it. She just shook her head, furious and confused. "I don't need to read his excuses," she said, voice trembling. "He abandoned us. End of story." And she stormed out, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. I sat there, staring at that closed door, the letter still between us, the truth she refused to see. And I thought, maybe I deserved that. Maybe she needed to hold on to her version of the story, the same way I once held on to mine. Because that's what we do when the truth is too heavy. We rewrite it until we can live with it that night. I walked to the porch and sat under the yellow porch light, the letter still in my hand. You know, people say truth sets you free, but they never tell you freedom hurts. Sometimes silence is the only kindness left. I folded the letter again, slid it into my Bible, and whispered, "You can rest now. Paul, I'll carry this one." But even as I said it, I wasn't sure if I was protecting her, or just too much of a coward to start the fire I'd lit once before. 2 days passed. 2 days of silence. No calls, no messages. Just the echo of that door slam replaying in my head. I'd been through heartbreak before, but this was worse. Losing your child's trust feels like dying twice. Then, on the third evening, I heard a knock, soft, hesitant, when I opened the door. Evelyn was standing there, eyes red and swollen, holding something in her hand. "I went to Aunt Rosa's house," she said quietly. "She told me everything." My breath caught. "Everything." She nodded. "About Dad? About how he took care of Clara when she was dying, and about how he sent letters you never answered." I couldn't speak. My throat just locked. She looked at me half angry, half broken. "Why didn't you tell me, Mom? Why did you let me hate him?" I looked down. "Because hate was easier than guilt." Her voice trembled. "You let me think my father was a monster. I built my whole life hating him. Every time someone tried to love me, I pushed them away because I thought love meant betrayal. You passed that poison to me." Her words hit harder than any slap could, because she was right. I'd ruined her idea of love before she ever had a chance to believe in it. Tears finally broke free. "I know, and I'm sorry. I thought I was protecting you." I didn't realize I was repeating the same cruelty I accused him of. Evelyn stepped closer. "Why are you telling me now?" I sighed. "Because lies rot, even when you bury them deep. And the smell was killing me." We both stood there, quiet. The only sound was the ticking of the wall, clock a reminder of every wasted year. Finally, she reached for the letter on the table. This is the one. Yes, she sat down and unfolded it carefully, as if afraid it might crumble. I watched her eyes move across the paper, her lips trembling as she read. She whispered, almost to herself, "He said he loved us both till his last breath." Her tears fell onto the page, darkening the ink. I whispered, "He did. I just refused to see it." After a long silence, she said, "You know what hurts the most? I spent my life resenting him, when all this time you were the one who betrayed him." I nodded slowly. Yes, I was. She wiped her face, breathing unevenly. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Mom. Not yet. I don't expect you to," I said softly. "Just don't let my mistakes define yours." She stood up, clutching the letter. "I'll keep this. I don't know what I'll do with it yet, but it's part of my story now, too." Then she turned toward the door, hesitated, and looked back at me. "He didn't deserve what happened, but neither did you. You were just human." The door closed gently behind her, and for the first time in 40 years, the house felt silent in a different way. Not empty, just still, like the truth had finally settled, even if forgiveness hadn't. That night, I went to the old photo frame on the wall, our wedding picture. I traced his face with my fingertip. Whispering, I told her, "Paul, maybe too late." But I told her, and for a second, I swear I could feel peace breathing in the room. Because sometimes redemption doesn't come through forgiveness. It comes through finally telling the truth, even if no one stays to hear it. That night, sleep wouldn't come. I kept hearing Evelyn's voice. "You were the one who betrayed him." The words looped like a confession inside my own skull, so I got up, lit a candle, sat at the kitchen table, the same one where Paul and I had once fought, once laughed, once dreamed of forever. The drawer where the doctor's note had been was still open. That fragile paper sat on the table beside his photograph, like an uninvited ghost between us. I started talking to him, out loud. "You know, I used to think hate made me strong. That every year I didn't forgive you was proof I'd survived you. But I see it now. Hate didn't protect me. It just kept me married to your memory." The candle flickered as if agreeing. I took a shaky breath. "I blamed you for ruining our family. But truth is, I did it the moment I believed the worst of you without asking why. The moment I let pride shout louder than love." I picked up the note again. The ink was faded, but the words still burned. "Keep this from Martha. She'll never forgive me for choosing her sister. Tell her I'm sorry." The note wasn't about betrayal, it was about protection. He'd chosen silence to spare me the truth, and that silence had cost us everything. And suddenly, I remembered the last thing he ever said to me before leaving. "You'll understand one day, Martha. I hope you'll forgive me then." I never did. Until now, my voice cracked as I whispered, "I forgive you, Paul. And I'm sorry it took me 40 years to realize you weren't the villain I was." I cried until the candle melted into a pool of wax. Then I opened the back door and stepped into the cold night air. The stars looked the same as they did on our wedding night, distant but still there. I held the note close to my chest. "You did love me. You just loved me differently than I wanted." And that's when I made my choice, my action, my reckoning. I didn't burn the note. I didn't hide it again. I placed it inside an envelope with one line written on it. "For Evelyn, the truth, her parents never spoke." I placed it by the window, where the morning light would find it. The next morning, I poured 2 cups of coffee out of habit. One for me, one for the empty chair. But this time, it didn't hurt. The silence didn't bite. I took his cup and set it in front of his photograph, smiling faintly. Every Thursday, I still set the extra plate. Not for you. For the woman I used to be, the one who finally learned the difference between love and pride. If you're listening and you're still angry at someone who isn't here to defend themselves, don't wait 40 years like I did. Hate is just love that forgot how to speak.